Hello, Vermont history students. Hi. Well, today is actually Monday, which is a bit early, I guess, for me to be making the video, but I had a scary thing last Wednesday where I couldn't get the video to load, and it drove me a little crazy. So if I do these in advance, it's more relaxing for me. So anyway, this is the video for Unit 6, which gets us about halfway through the semester, and ends in 1890, which is a appropriate date for it to end, because that's really sort of like not just the halfway point of the semester, but the turning point in Vermont's history, which is what happened is in the early 1890s there was a huge explosion in summer tourism. And before that, hopefully the uphill-downhill thing makes sense to you, but downhillers want progress and development and industry, and the worst thing about Vermont for them is the fact that it's so rural. And uphillers like it, it's stable. They like the fact that Vermont's rural, and that the state is not necessarily controlled by industrialists the way that other states are, although it was to a great extent. But anyway, then after summer tourism kicks in, then the worst thing about Vermont for downhillers becomes the best thing about it. You can sell Vermont, its ruralness, as a commodity. But will that make it so that downhillers respect uphill life more, or they want to change uphillers more than they ever did? Anyway, that's the big turning point, is 1890. So that's the point we get to today's class. The outline has 4 sections. The first and the third of them actually deal with my book project that I'm working on. And hopefully, and also online I put an academic article that I wrote about the Swedish recruitment program that I'm going to talk about in this video, and that we're going to trace the after effects of for the rest of the semester. It's going to be a cool book. It's a cool book project. I'm not giving it to you in any sort of self-indulgent way, but it's nice when you're teaching a course to constantly cycle out old material and cycle in new material, so it keeps things fresh. And since this is an ongoing project, I want to keep it fresh in my mind, and also I want to see if I can effectively get this material across in an online course. So hopefully it'll work for you. Now, as far as housekeeping goes, I just got through responding to a second response to town meeting, and I thought town meeting went really well. Although not all of you checked in. Of course, you can always check in late, and at the end of the semester I'm going to go through and see who has posted. I'm going to add up all the posts that people made, because that's an important part of your grade. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and do it, but that does diminish the extent to which other people will probably read and respond to what you had to say about town meeting. You'll be probably seeing this on Wednesday, and of course the discussion question for Unit 5 will just be wrapping up at that point. And then there's another discussion question for Friday associated with this unit. And so everything's, and assessment papers. Between X date and X date, between 1800 and 1850, Vermont grew more united, more divided, whatever the evidence tells you. I'm starting to see those papers roll in. By the end of this week, please get me one. Don't put it off and then give me 3 all at once at the end. The idea is you space them out and you tell the history of Vermont like a story. And so do the assignment the way it's supposed to be done. Get me a paper by the end of this week. It doesn't have to be anything hugely long, particularly with those who've been doing a lot of contributions to the discussion board, to the forums. I appreciate that effort. And so 3 or 4 pages. If you want to do more, obviously go right ahead. Use articles that I put in the articles folder to supplement the textbook. Use course material. You'll be good to go. So there's 4 sections to this unit. The first one is about the origins of the program. There was the thing that Gilded Age Vermont revolves around is the question of whether Vermont was in decline or stable. And there were a lot of people, downhillers in particular, who thought that Vermont was in a serious state of crisis, was doing horribly, and that the remedy for this needed to be a lot of modernization. Whereas many uphillers found the trajectory of Vermont society and economy to be perfectly suited to the kind of life that they wanted. But downhillers, in an effort to figure out what was wrong with Vermont, came up with a commissioner position, Commissioner of Agriculture and Manufacturing. And this job went to a guy whose name was Alonzo Valentine, a Civil War major a big industrialist down in Bennington. He owned a factory that made women's underwear, for what it's worth. And he was appointed commissioner, and he immediately, in 1889, and in 1889 he started sending out these, what he called circulars. They were forms to be filled out about how much manufacturing, how much dairying, and all these things that was going on. And he sent out this huge number of these forms, and virtually none of them came back. He didn't include postage. And the idea was he was going to accumulate data, information about Vermont. But right off the bat, from the beginning, he decided the thing he wanted to do was recruit Swedes. He had been out west at the time of the gold rush. He knew Swedes, and he was, like a lot of people in Vermont, shared a real contempt for French Canadians and also for the Irish. And there's this big fear that, you know, the Yankees are departing and French Canadians are coming in and filling up the state, and it'll be the end of Vermont. So the solution to him was to recruit Swedes. And he began to talk this up with people, and there was a remarkably positive response in the state. And the result was that he compiled a list of contacts of people in small towns, who would be willing to serve as ambassadors to connect Swedes with farms. And then also he compiled the first really sort of large comprehensive list of farms for sale in Vermont. And the second effect of his program in 1889 was that it was hugely news of the weird around the country. This program that Vermont was going to deal with, its what Valentine called its abandoned farm problem, was that they were going to recruit Swedes. And articles on the subject were in everything, the New York Times and Chicago Herald and San Francisco newspapers. There was a report on it in a New Zealand newspaper. And what began to happen is that Valentine's office began to fill up with letters from people in other places who wanted Vermont farms as summer homes. And Valentine was always saying there's abandoned farms in Vermont, abandoned farms. And this made a lot of people in Vermont upset, because it gave you the impression that Vermont was like a dying place. People were just wandering off. There weren't abandoned farms. There were farms for sale, or farms that had gone back to woodlot. But people began to write to Valentine and say, I heard about how cheap farms are. Do you think I could get one as a summer home? And then he would pass these letters on to the network of contacts he'd established, or send them his list of farms for sale. And it's like, as a miraculous side benefit of his Swedish recruitment program, tourism became advertised in the state without having to spend any advertising money. So either he's a crazy person for thinking that recruiting Swedish farmers would solve Vermont's problems, or he's a genius for using it as a hoax, a gimmick, in order to get attention to Vermont. But it worked. Now, what is he selling? Section 2, briefly, is about the industrial side of the state. And of course Vermont had all of the same problems that Gilded Age North particularly had. You know, the Gilded Age, the 1880s, is an era when, you know, the streets ran in blood, and you see the rise of the Knights of Labor, and giant, massive challenges to the capitalist system as it was emerging. And this happened in Vermont too. In Vershire and the copper mines, there was the Vershire War, a big strike in 1883. The Knights of Labor organized in a bunch of places, most notably in Rutland. And as a result of their organizing in Rutland, it transferred over to the ballot box, and this Redfield Proctor, who owned the Vermont Marble Company, then went to the state legislature and carved a town named Proctor out of Rutland just for himself, because he didn't want to live with his farmers, have his life politically run by his workers. And the town of Proctor is still there. And so Vermont has child labor, Vermont has strikes, Vermont has poverty, it has industrial accidents. Vermont suffers from all the same ills that other places do, perhaps on a smaller scale, but nevertheless, it's all there. Vermont has all those modern problems. I put a picture of Winooski's woolen mill up to illustrate that. But the crazy thing is, of course, that those modern things, which downhillers, maybe not strikes or industrial accidents or child labor, but those things that were modern, that downhillers liked, begin to come into a different light as a result of what happened with Valentine and the Swedes in 1890. Now, it wasn't just about that. Vermont had had tourism. Before the Civil War, Southerners came to Vermont hotels. After the Civil War, railroads were mostly responsible for promoting Vermont tourism. But what happened was Valentine sent this emissary, this guy John Nordgren, who was a Swedish native who lived in Nebraska, with a map of Vermont that I have online for you, and in the fall of 1889, and he went back to his hometown in a very poor section of Sweden, western Sweden, called Vermont, and then he came back in April of 1890 with 55 Swedes. He brought Swedes, swear to God. They came to Philadelphia on the British Princess on April 22nd. They went to New York, Valentine met them, and then he redistributed them in 3 colonies, Vershire, Wilmington, and Landgrove, Vermont. The Vershire colony broke up immediately. The Wilmington one doesn't really interest me much, but I can only trace so many. But the Landgrove one, 5 families settled in Landgrove. And what I want to do throughout the semester is trace what happens to these people, because their lives and their descendants are very much the story of Vermont, as you will see. But in the fall of 1890, after in the summer he brought over these Swedes, the state legislature was like, this is stupid, why are we spending money recruiting Swedes? And the program got canceled. But Valentine left behind a list of contacts and a list of desirable farms for sale. And the Board of Agriculture took over and began to publish and distribute Valentine's list, calling it a list of desirable Vermont farms for sale. And within a couple years, it'll become Vermont. It's fertile fields and summer homes, because farmers didn't want Vermont land, Vermont houses, farmhouses, but middle-class people in Boston and New York and other places did. And tourism is going to radically reshape the whole narrative about the state. And this is illustrated by the 4th section, a quick story. In Wilmington, Vermont, they had this lake called Ray's Pond. The Ray family lived on it. And in 1890, not only did Swedes arrive, but also the Deerfield Railroad came in for the first time. And so they had this lake that tourists could be on, and they built a hotel, but they thought the name Ray's Pond was not exotic enough or not attractive enough. So they changed the name of it to Lake Raponda. I'm kidding you not, Lake Raponda instead of Ray's Pond. And that's a metaphor for what are downhillers going to do to uphillers, and what's it going to be like after tourism kicks in, big time. And the most valuable thing about Vermont is its ruralness, is its backwardness. Are they going to respect uphillers more and respect their way of life? Or are they going to interfere with the uphill life and try to change it more than ever in order to suit tourist expectations of what Vermont should look like? And that's what I want you to think about as we enter into this new era of the state. And that's the end of the video for Unit 6. And the last couple times I would go on and I would turn it off, and then we would miss the last couple seconds. I don't know. So if we want to have some... Terribly out of tune. Terribly out of tune, but it's just in the way anyway. So did I kill enough time? Okay, that's probably good enough.